afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our second set of sessions here at the virtual job fair. Joining me is Neha. She is the founder of Beam Career Coaching. She is also the host of Workplace Wellness Podcast. She is experienced in helping thousands of professionals with their job search, from market positioning to landing the best offer possible, solving people problems for business through innovation and empathy. Thank you so much for your session today. We really appreciate you coming back again for one of our events. Everyone, feel free to ask as many questions as you want in the chat on the side there. We really want this session to be as interactive as possible. So thank you again, everyone, and thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Sandra. Appreciate that. And just to echo the comment around asking questions, I would love for this to be as interactive as possible. So I'll be keeping an eye out in the chat box, and there'll also be some dedicated time towards the end for a Q&A. So in terms of the agenda for today, I will go through my presenter bio in a little bit more detail, and then we'll be diving into resume tips to stand out. And then we'll be going over a resume review, critiquing it in action. And then we will be going over cover letter tips, as well as networking and outreach tactics. And then we'll have a quick activity. So if you have a pen and paper, make sure that you have that nearby, or else open a note-taking app, and it'll be useful throughout the session to take notes, but also for the activity. And then we'll be bringing it all together. And as mentioned, we'll have a little Q&A at the end, but please feel free to leverage the chat box. I see that Steve is in Mississauga. He's currently an entrepreneur looking to find a part-time role that will bring in some income. That's a really wise decision. And your skill set there is retail or hospitality. That's great to know if anyone wants to connect with Steve. And then we have Gustavo from Costa Rica. Really nice to meet someone from so far away. Also a tech subject matter expert. Okay, if anyone else wants to introduce themselves in the chat box, please do so. So to tell you a little bit more about myself, so as Sandra mentioned, I have had the privilege of helping thousands of individuals get hired in the past decade. I have an honors double major in psychology and French studies from Western University, as well as a certificate in human resources management from University of Toronto. And I'm also currently completing my certification in personal and business coaching. I predominantly help job seekers build their confidence and land a job they love. I also coach employers and consult them on talent strategy. Fun facts about me: I grew up in 5 countries: Kenya, Sri Lanka, the UAE, Pakistan, and of course, Canada. And I live in Midtown Toronto. And I am the host of a podcast, Career Catharsis. So you can find that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, you name it, it should be there. Before we dive into the sections that I have prepared for you today, I want to highlight that it's super important to find jobs that match your career objective. So your career objective is going to be one career direction. And this will make it really easy to make minor tweaks to your resume to match the job description, rather than recreating a resume from scratch every time you find a new job that you're excited about. So do a little bit of that soul searching and really define what your career direction is going to be for the next 3 to 6 months. And then after that 3 to 6 month period, if you feel like the feedback hasn't been so great, maybe you decide to switch your career direction, and that series of experiments will help you kind of learn something and also stay accountable and committed, rather than spending hours tailoring a resume. It should only take you 10 to 15 minutes to tailor your application each time. And the way that you can do that is by setting one career direction. And you can study job descriptions by highlighting key skills. So seeing what you have that aligns with the job, and then recognizing what the gaps might be. And you can also leverage a tool called jobscan.co, where you can copy paste your resume and copy paste the job description and see where the alignment is and where the misalignment is. And it gives you something to work with to draft a resume that's more in line with the career direction that you've set. So one career direction might have multiple job titles, but they're all within the same wheelhouse. So an example of this would be, let's say, a program manager or a project manager. Those are very similar titles, but then, going a step further, making sure that they're in the same wheelhouse, program manager, project manager within human resources, let's say. So that's one career direction, but multiple job titles. So hopefully you get the idea there. And based off of that, a few resume tips that I have for you to stand out include start writing without judgment. So let's say that you are drafting a resume after doing the soul searching, you've set your career direction. Start writing without judgment and come back to it to refine and proofread. You can ask a friend or mentor to review and share their thoughts. You can combat ageism. Let's say that you went to school in the 90s or beyond that. Make sure that you are combating discrimination, let's say ageism, by stating graduated versus the graduation year. You can nest your early career under prior to 2010 as an example. So anything that's 10 years or more, that work experience can be under early career experience under a heading prior to 2010. And that way you can stand out as an applicant of choice without introducing any bias into a review of your resume. You also want to keep it simple. Keep it 1 to 2 pages max. You don't have to squeeze everything on one page. You are allowed the grace of a second page. For some opportunities, such as leadership opportunities or even some opportunities in the tech space, 3 pages is good too, because they want more context in terms of the languages and tools that you've used. But typically 1 to 2 pages is good. And then make sure that you have a Word doc so that if you are ingesting your resume into an applicant tracking system, it's able to easily pull the job titles and pre-fill the resume for you. However, some more advanced ATS systems are being able to also ingest that information through a PDF, but you want to make sure that you are reading the instructions on the job description. They might tell you if they prefer PDF, if they prefer Word doc. And a quick hack, if the resume is going to be ingested into a system, you can actually download your resume on LinkedIn if you click more. So if there's 3 dots at the top right, you can click that, download the resume, and you can apply through that. You want there to be a consistent format. You want to add relevant skills to the job, and you want to focus on achievements versus responsibilities. And we're going to dive into that in a second. You want neutral fonts, so nothing that is illegible, no cursive, no Comic Sans. I would say stick to Times New Roman, Arial, Calibri, Helvetica. Those are some really clean, simple fonts. And try to stick to blue and gray if you are going to introduce some color, as these are still neutral enough. You don't want it to be super colorful, or it can be distracting, or it can introduce bias towards your resume. Unless you're in marketing, creative, or design, try to keep it black and white, maybe some blues and grays to highlight different sections if need be. Or you can alternate the font, again, keeping it clean, simple, legible. Or you can put something in all caps for a section header, but try to keep it neutral, right? And then have proofs of work ready in case you are somebody who has a number of projects, writing samples. Make sure that there's a link to your personal portfolio. If it's password protected, make sure the password is available on your resume, and have those links hyperlinked onto the resume, since most people are opening them up on their laptop and they can click and check out your proofs of work or your projects. Any questions about resume tips to stand out? Anything that I mentioned that you have questions on before I move on? Meanwhile, I'm gonna see here, we have Amrita, relatively new to Canada, welcome. lives in Toronto, looking for an entry-level job as an administrative assistant, especially in a nonprofit organization. So you might be familiar with Charity Village. That's a great spot for any nonprofit jobs. And then Begum is based in Toronto as well, looking for a data analyst position, ideally with a financial background. I know tons of jobs in the banking sector that are open at the moment. Usually a referral goes a long way. And we'll talk about more strategies in a minute. So as I was talking about achievements versus responsibilities, sometimes we lack the language or we lack a specific idea of what that looks like, right? What is an achievement? So here are some examples of achievements that many business professionals have that they can add to their resume. So an example would be time saved. Let's say that you implemented a new group testing method in recruitment to save an average of 20 hours of candidate testing time per week. That's an achievement. You could talk about cost reduction. So reduce the operations department annual spend by 30% by renegotiating contracts with vendors to cut features with poor usage. So this is very clear in terms of having an action verb to start, talking about the specific function or area of expertise, as well as a quantitative measure, and then talking about the stakeholders that were impacted as well. Another example of an accomplishment could be revenue generated. So if you're in sales or account management, thinking about revenue generated. So in this example, generated an additional $100,000 in revenue in Q1, exceeding sales target by 10%. So in sales, this is also a relative thing, right? So you might be in a role where you're responsible for hundreds of thousands in general revenue, or you might have a target of millions, or you might have a lower quota. So that's where maybe sticking to the percentage might actually be more beneficial or add a little bit more color to how impressive this goal was. And then thinking about task volume, right? So let's say that you are in a help desk role, operations role, where you're managing cases or tickets. So an example would be closed 30 tickets a day, resolving user queries within assigned service level agreement of 24 hours. So what was the cadence there? That also gives me an indication of how quickly you move and how much you can produce within a given time frame. You can talk about direct reports or mentees. If you are a team lead or a manager, manage 6 direct reports. So how big was your team size? You can talk about projects completed. So thinking about how many average projects you have at a time that you are juggling your time between. So as an example, completed an average of 3 projects per quarter, documenting process and training teams cross-functionally on handover. That's an example of project-based accomplishment. So hopefully you all can see the resume here. I'm going to kind of review and critique this. So at the top, we have a professional summary. I want to highlight this is not mandatory. You can jump straight into your experience. Most of the time, employers are most interested in your experience, so it's totally okay to jump straight into that. However, if you want to share your career objective, if you want to kind of share a little bit of your career narrative, having 1 to 2 lines for your professional summary can be great to highlight your functional area of expertise. Maybe you want to collate your years of experience, and then you can quickly tailor the objective at the end for each of the job applications that you have. So in this specific case, this individual has many years of experience. So they have listed their earlier work experience under a section called early career, which is prior to 2007. So they're not exceeding 15 years of experience on their resume right off the bat. Even if they have 20, 30 years of experience, you don't have to list all of that. You can have an early career section. And the reason we do this is to keep the focus on the most relevant recent experience. And you can have your honorable mentions from earlier on in your career nested under a clean section so that employers can ask you about it, but it's not something that is really tied to where you're headed next, right? What happened 15 years ago is not very much tied to where you're headed next. And it can create hesitation around ageism, right? Or introduce bias, which is why we want to kind of mask the total years of experience if it's 20, 30 years plus. Another thing I would like to point out here is if you have volunteer experience, maybe you want to reframe that as leadership and community engagement. So depending on what your target role is, you might list this as side projects if you are in the tech space, for example, right? So rather than volunteer, you can kind of just list it as a more specific heading within your area of expertise or your function. And then at the bottom, you can list skills and interests. I've seen skills at the top sometimes, and that can be good. That's not a bad idea. But interests usually at the bottom. And I will say you don't actually need your interests on your resume. So if you're pressed for space, you don't need your interests there. I do think listing your skills is useful. It allows me to quickly scan what are your main tools, technologies, and functional areas of expertise, any languages, particularly French. That would be something that I would recommend listing on here. And you'll notice that everything starts off with an action verb. That's one way to stand out. You can see that it's legible font, clear, consistent formatting, and it has the dates, so the month as well as the year. That's important. When it comes to cover letter tips, you want to be succinct versus brief, right? So being succinct means being able to say more with less words, versus brief is just, less word count for the sake of less word count, which is not what we want. We do want to aim for 1 page. Some instructions you'll see will ask for a cover letter of 2 pages. So be sure to reference the instructions. Some employers do not require a cover letter. However, I do think that in order to stand out, if it's a job that you're really excited about, spending an extra half hour to customize a cover letter. Remember, if you have one career direction, it should not take too long to tailor. That can be really useful. And you don't want to repeat the same points as your resume, right? You want to expand on a few key points so you can share an example of something on your resume and you can kind of expand on that experience, or you add something new to the cover letter that's not on your resume. And you want to save some information for the interview. So it's not an essay, it's not a book. It's simply an overview of relevant experiences that make you a good fit for the role. You don't want to overwhelm the reader. You also want to share something valuable. So really studying the job description, I would say highlight everything on the job description. If you want to copy paste that into a Word doc or a Google Doc, you can easily then play around with that information and create relevant stories or examples to highlight how you're a good match, right? Essentially, you're trying to create a sense of mutual alignment. And you want to show the employer you've researched the role and you've researched the company. So reference anything listed on their website that either inspired you, motivated you to apply, resonates with your past experience, your education, your interests, your goals, and don't spend all day on it, right? The idea of having a cover letter that you can customize for the same career direction is that you'll probably be sharing the same examples from your career narrative, but you'll just be incorporating the research on the company as the bit that you tailor, right? And you definitely want a second set of eyes to proofread. I know this can be difficult for people. So what I would recommend doing is we have an opportunity right now to network. If you want to create an accountability buddy or partner, maybe you decide to connect with each other and simply take a quick look at each other's resume and cover letters from time to time. It could be a great way to have support and to ensure that your job application is standing out and doesn't have any grammatical errors. I'm looking at the chat box. Shilendra, nice to meet you. Minal, nice to meet you. Student in your final semester in Canada, searching for a job related to data science and data analytics. Okay, question. Can you please give some guidelines on what I should emphasize on so that my resume attracts recruiters? So going back to what I said earlier, you want to make sure that you're studying the job description, and you want to make sure that you have one career direction at a time. So from the sounds of it, data science, data analytics, that's one career direction. So good job on having a clear goal. Now that you know what your goal is, you can find job descriptions, go to jobscan.co and copy paste your resume as well as the job description to see where the alignment is and the misalignment is, and what you might need to incorporate into your resume to match the skills and the needs of the role. Specifically for data science, of course, you want your relevant tools listed on there, and you want some examples of any projects that you've worked on, any data visualization examples that you have, whether they're side projects or work experience. So you're still in school, so I imagine that you might not have as much experience, but this is where projects make a really big difference, maybe even linking to those relevant projects. And if you're having trouble finding projects, feel free to connect with me. I'm happy to connect you with individuals that may be working on some cool things that you can practice and have something to showcase. And I see Shilendra, you can connect with me afterwards and I can share the documents. And then Chid, very helpful pointers. You're welcome. Could you share a good approach to address employment gap on the resume? That's a great point. So for an employment gap, you can list the time frame and you can talk about what you were doing in that time. Whether it was a family leave, you can list your family leave, right? It's okay to be transparent, especially nowadays. Recruiters are starting to kind of understand and empathize with many candidates. Not all of them, but a lot of them are, right? So you can actually list your family leave. You can actually list, what you were up to, whether you had some volunteer engagement, any side projects, anything that you learned, if you were traveling, if you took a sabbatical, if you were in school. It's okay to list and be transparent about it. The idea there is to get ahead of the question. If it's something less than 6 months, you don't need to list it. If it's more than 6 months, I would recommend listing it and showcasing what you did. And if you weren't doing much, if it was, let's say, a family leave, or if you were sick, or if you were tending to somebody who was sick, you can list that, right? You can list it as family leave. Anything less than 6 months, I wouldn't worry too much about it. When it comes to networking tips and outreach, so this is really important, right? So you're not just tailoring your resume for 10 to 15 minutes when you apply. You're not just tailoring a cover letter, whether or not it's requested. Making sure that you send a cover letter for a job that you're really excited about can help. You're also networking and you are doing the outreach, right? So here's where being really strategic and spending extra time on the job applications that you're really interested in. Again, not spending all day, but spending a little bit more time. What you can do here is build your personal brand on LinkedIn and relevant job boards. So let's say if you're in the tech space, make sure that you're on Angel List. You can also leverage teal.com. You can leverage Power to Fly. You can check out Tech Toronto. You can check out Mars Discovery District. They have a list of startups that they will highlight any job openings for. So making sure that you have a personal brand on LinkedIn, but also, if there's room to kind of get involved with any of the relevant professional associations or job boards. And then also on social media, right? You have this tool available to you. It doesn't just have to be about your personal life. You can leverage social media to talk about your profession, to talk about the fact that you're looking for a job, and then you're getting the word out there, right? So people in your network are able to assist you. So I think we might be running out of time, so I'm going to quickly move ahead. But I also want you to think about 3 types of profiles to target when you're sending out your outreach. You want to target future peers, that can be referrals, hiring managers, so that's the person you're going to report to, as well as recruiters. You want to draft templates for emails. You can use the Apollo extension to find emails. And you also want to draft a template for LinkedIn connection notes. And there's a 300 character limit, so be mindful of that, as well as in-mails if you have LinkedIn Premium, but that's not necessary. You can simply connect and have a short note. Quick activity, we might not be able to actually do this in session, but after the session, if you want to take a pen and paper and list a minimum of 5 job titles under one career direction that you've thought of applying for, and list the companies, this will help you take the next step in applying for jobs. Bringing it all together, I want you to set one career direction and focus on relevant content on your resume. This requires studying the job description and not spending more than 10 to 15 minutes tailoring before applying. You want to write a cover letter that says something different or expands on your resume. You're not just saying the same thing as your resume. And you don't want to spray and pray. You want to tailor applications and be proactive with outreach, as I mentioned, through emails, in-mails, or connection notes on LinkedIn. Any questions? You're welcome. So if anybody has questions, I'm going to kind of scan through the chat box to see if there's anything I can answer. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, so you can find me and ask me questions there. Happy to answer anything on your mind if something comes up after the session. And then I'm also pretty active on Instagram at coach.neha. You can follow along for some tips there. I'm actually promoting a free mentoring program right now. If you want to be matched to a mentor, or if you want to be a mentor, you can sign up for that there. I also have a Facebook group, so you can search Bean Career Coaching and I can add you to the group. And then if you want to text me, you can text me at 437-990-4777. I can talk about job searching all day. I'm happy to take your questions. You can also email me at info@beancareercoaching.com and we can continue the conversation. I think we have about 2 minutes in case there are any questions top of mind. Free career coaching. So there's a free mentoring program that I'm running. If you want to sign up for that, you can connect with me either on LinkedIn or on Instagram, and I can send you the link to join the free mentoring program. In fact, I'll just drop it in the chat really quickly. You can go ahead and fill out that form for free mentoring. This is an experiment that I'm running, and hopefully we can create some good mentorship matches. So it's in the chat there if you want to go ahead and sign up. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm not sure if this is going to time out or not, but that's all that I have for today. And if you want to connect, once again, we can chat on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook group. You can text me or email me. The information is up on the presentation. This has also been recorded. If you want to visit Toronto Jobs YouTube channel, you'll find it in the next couple of days. But again, you can also reach out to me and I'm happy to share the presentation deck with you. Lastly, there is a link for a free mentoring program in the chat box. Thank you so much and see you in the other sessions. Okay, one question from Mustafa. New to Canada, been here for 3 weeks. Well, welcome to Canada. Currently living in Mississauga. brand manager looking for marketing opportunities in the pharmaceutical industry, feel free to connect with me. I do have some connections in the pharmaceutical industry. I would also recommend joining the mentorship program. The link is in the chat box there. I do have some individuals in marketing that maybe I can connect you to. I would, again, just say make a list of companies and tailor your resume for each of those applications. Make sure that you're highlighting your marketing experience. I would even consider taking a course at General Assembly to get acquainted with the laws in Canada. I think that's the key piece, is when you're moving to a new country. The reason why we talk about Canadian experience, and the reason why that can be a reason you don't get called for an interview, is because of the legislation, right? So it's not that we don't value experience abroad, it's the understanding of the legal requirements and compliance. So in order to brush up on that, taking some certification or courses can be a great way to showcase that you check the boxes when it comes to marketing legislation and compliance. And a big piece of that is also accessibility. So General Assembly is a great source to brush up on that. There's also other, I would say, courses that you might be able to look into. All right, thank you.